जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी,
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 जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी,
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 यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन,
यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन,
यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन,
यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन,
यमुना तीरा वनचारी,
यमुना तीरा वनचारी,
यमुना तीरा वनचारी,
यमुना तीरा वनचारी,
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी,
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 जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सतहिस डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, श्री श्री राधा लंडनेश्वर की जय, श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय, श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा मई की जय, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled
Hare
devotees.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled
Hare
devotees.
Krishna.
All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayamudiraye
Tato Jayamudirahe
Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu
Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Bhagavatyuttama Shloke
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki
Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I am very happy to be with all the devotees of ISKCON London, Sri Sri Radha London Ishwara Temple, and I'm especially happy that seminars of this nature are being organized. This series of lectures given by various devotees is titled Krishna in Vrindavan, wherein different important pastimes of Krishna will be discussed. I do hope that all of you in London, and perhaps those of you who are hearing on other platforms from elsewhere, are keeping well and safe in the midst of this pandemic, and that you are also happily making advancement in your Krishna consciousness. The topic I will be speaking on is from the 6th chapter of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, titled The Killing of the Demon Putana. So it is a very important topic because Putana happens to be the first demon that Krishna killed in Vrindavan. And he was about 6 days old at that time. Just 6 days after birth, he performed such an extraordinary pastime. So these pastimes of Krishna, where he kills the demons, are significant for many reasons. One of them, as Srila Bhakti Thakur mentions in his Chaitanya Shikshamrita, is that it is important for us as sadhakas, as practitioners of devotional service, to study, to hear about and meditate on these pastimes of the Lord killing the demons in Vrindavan. Because each of these demons represent different anarthas, the unwanted things in our heart, which are the obstacles that prevent us from making advancement in Krishna consciousness. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions that Putana represents the pseudo-guru. Two types. One, the guru without. And especially if any individual starts teaching others about sense gratification or about the path of impersonal liberation from material existence as the goals of life, then certainly that person is a false guru. Not only that, even from inside within one's heart, if one starts developing a tendency towards too much of empiric philosophical analysis, or putting too much of emphasis on reasoning and logic according to sense perception, trying to understand everything only on the basis of what these senses can perceive, etc., that is another form of deception, because such an attitude or a practice deprives us of very, very valuable knowledge that can be obtained from the Vedic scriptures only by a process of submissive oral reception, of connecting ourselves to the disciplic succession. So that said, let's commence on our discussion of the 6th chapter. Now, a bit of a background to this chapter. Soon after Krishna's birth, Nanda Maharaj went to Mathura to pay the taxes to King Kamsa. And when he went there, he finished his formalities and then happened to meet his dear friend Vasudeva, who was the father of Krishna in Mathura. And they had a very nice interaction. And as Nanda Maharaj was chatting with Vasudeva, Vasudeva urged him to not stay on longer in Mathura, but to return speedily to Vrindavan. Na ihastheyam bahutitham. Please do not stay here for bahutithi. Bahutitha means for many days. Na ihastheyam, don't stay here for long. Why not? Santi utpatascha gokule. Because I fear there will be many disturbances in Gokula. Utpata means disturbance. Utpataha is plural. So there will be many disturbances in Gokul. So please rush back, my dear Nanda Maharaj. So naturally, Nanda Maharaj's mind is a little unsettled because of that. And he rushes back. And the first verse, or the 6th chapter, opens with the first verse in which Shukadeva Goswami says to Maharaj Parikshit that while Nanda Maharaj was on the way home from Mathura to Vrindavan, he started thinking about what Vasudeva had told him. And he reasoned that Vasudeva was such a saintly person, such a learned person, and what he had said couldn't possibly be wrong. In any case, he was struck with some fear for the well-being of his dear son, Krishna. And therefore he took shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Controller, Lord Hari. Harim Jagama Sharanam. He took shelter of Lord Hari. Of course, little did he know that the personality that he thought was his son was actually none other than Lord Hari himself. In any case, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that whenever there is danger, the pure devotee thinks of the protection and shelter of the Supreme Lord. This material world is full of difficulties, full of dangers, full of troubles of all sorts, coming from all directions. And therefore, devotees who are also living in the material world will not be spared of these dangers and difficulties. And the right thing to do is to follow in Nanda Maharaj's footsteps by taking internal shelter of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, by chanting his names fervently, with great faith and devotion. Then Shukadeva Goswami explains, or he introduces Putana now. Of course, he has not introduced Putana for the first time in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That happened much earlier in the first canto, in the third canto, I beg your pardon, when Uddhava speaks to Vidura. And we'll come to that in some time. So anyway, what was Putana? She was a very fierce demoness. And by virtue of her yogic practices, aiming for mystic perfection, and also owing, according to one of the Puranas, the blessings of Durvasa Muni, she was able to acquire some mystic powers which enabled her to have extraordinary abilities which was not normally possible for human beings. So she was basically a very evil woman. Bala Ghatini. She was a Rakshasi or a demoness whose nature was to kill babies. So, when Nanda Maharaj was returning to Gokul, Putana was wandering here and there in different places, in the cities, in the towns, in the villages, in the pasture lands. And wherever she went, she looked for babies and she tried to kill them. Now, it is interesting that Srila Prabhupada or one of the acharyas recommends, he explains that actually it was Kamsa's men's children that Putana ended up killing. Because actually the devotees of Krishna are always under the shelter and protection of Krishna. So actually there was no reason for Nanda Maharaj to be disturbed, and neither was there any fear for the Vrajavasis, because Krishna was with them. So, and that's where in the next verse, Shukadev Goswami explains that actually there is no danger from bad elements wherever there is hearing and chanting about Lord Krishna. So naturally, therefore, Kamsa was not actually able to harm any of the babies or the children of the Vrajavasis who were pure devotees of Krishna. But wherever she went in different places, she ended up killing the children of Kamsa's own men. And Kamsa unwittingly became the cause of causing harm to his own men. Because after all, Putana was a representative of Kamsa. She was his associate. And she had been sent by Kamsa to kill Krishna. And Kamsa also later on would send many, many demons, each of whom would be unsuccessful in doing so, and on the contrary, they themselves would get killed by Krishna and be delivered. So, Shukadev Goswami mentions here that wherever people perform devotional service of hearing and chanting, there cannot be any danger from bad elements. There are different types of bad elements, and there are ghosts, and there are, all sorts of things. There are witches, and so these things perhaps are not so visible as far as witches are concerned, in this day and age. But definitely dangers of various sorts are all around us. And Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that real protection comes from the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. This is the ultimate protection. Of course, we should not misconstrue Srila Prabhupada's statement to mean that we should not reasonably take any measures for our own protection. Indeed, we should. For example, when we are sick, we take medicines. Because we need food, we work for a livelihood and we get some money. So in this way, we act for our own protection. When we sleep at night, we lock the doors of the house. We have an alarm system. We do not unnecessarily tax Krishna for our protection. At the same time, we should know that even though we may do such things, as is our duty and responsibility, nevertheless, ultimately, it is Krishna who will protect us. At another place, Srila Prabhupada also mentions that whenever we are in difficulty, we should sit down at one place and we should chant the holy names loudly and fervently. And sure enough, very soon, our anxiety, our fears, and our stress will evaporate. It will go away. So Shukadev Goswami continues and speaks about Putana entering Gokula. Shukadev Goswami describes Putana in 2 words here, Kama Charini. Kama means desire, Charini means one who moves. So she had the mystic power to move any place she liked by her own desire. It's one of the mystic perfections of yoga. And she's also called a Khechari. Khe refers to ether or to space. So Khechari refers to one who travels in outer space. Now that's quite an extraordinary thing. So Putana was such a powerful demoness that she could travel wherever she liked, even in outer space. And she came along. And as she came to Nanda Gokulam, she came to the Gokul of Nanda Maharaj. And she, by her mystic power, also transformed herself into a very beautiful young woman. Yoshitva Mayaya Atmanam. Mayaya means by her own mystic perfection. Atmanam herself. Yoshitva means she turned herself into a very beautiful young woman. And then she entered into Nanda Gokula. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that actually it was the Lord's Leela Shakti, or his pastime potency, that actually inspired her from within her heart to come to Gokul, because Krishna had to inaugurate the pastime of killing demons. Well, actually, even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Riddeshir Vinatishthati Brahmana Sarva Bhutanam Yantra Rudhani Mayaya, that the super soul is in the heart of all living entities and is directing their wanderings. So in any case, Krishna is seated in the heart and directs the wanderings of all living entities, and particularly here in such cases where personalities are going to participate very intimately in Krishna's pastimes, it is directly the pastime potency of the Lord that intervenes. So, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purports that such demonesses, which are called Rakshasis, they acquire mystic powers by which they can travel everywhere. Srila Prabhupada mentions how some of them sit on a stick and fly from place to place. Now it's interesting how these, shall we say, memories of earlier ages are extant even today in various cultures. In every culture, in every country, there will be some tradition of witches who fly around on a broomstick or on some kind of a stick. So you can see that formerly in the Vedic culture, these things were known. So in any case, Putana has come in disguised as a very beautiful woman. And Shukadev Goswami mentions her beautiful form and says that the Gopas, the men of Vrindavan, were completely enamored by her charm, by her beauty. And even the ladies, the gopis, were also very, very charmed. And they thought in their innocence that the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi herself, had arrived, because she looked so serene and so beautiful. It was as if Lakshmi Devi had come bearing a lotus flower in her hand. And then Putana came right into Nanda Maharaj's house as she entered Gokul and went into the room where Krishna, baby Krishna, was lying. So she's called Balagraha, the witch who kills children. And as she was searching for Krishna, somehow or the other, by the arrangement of providence, and we know the providence in this case means the Leela Shakti of the Lord, she entered Nanda Grihe, the house of Nanda, and she saw that personality, Balam Pratichanna Nijoru Tejasam. She saw that Balam, that particular child, who had covered his own unlimited prowess, Nija Uru Tejasam, by his appearing as an ordinary baby. And he was actually destined to be the cause of the end of Putana. So therefore, Asat Antakam. So therefore, he was a form who would be the end, or would spell the death of all the demons. So now, Putana, when she came in there, she saw this child sleeping, and she understood immediately that this child was not ordinary. that this child was meant to kill demons. So at this time, of course, because the Brajabasis were so enamored by her serene looks, her beautiful looks, they didn't intervene or interfere. They all kept gazing at her in a sense of wonder. Meanwhile, baby Krishna lay there like a fire covered by smoke. When there's a little bit of fire and there is a lot of smoke, you sometimes cannot discern the presence of fire visibly, but you can understand, of course, by the symptoms that there is smoke. So similarly, Putana also could not directly perceive it, but she sensed that even though this child looked very ordinary, but actually this child is meant to be the spell, the death knell of all the demons. And when Putana saw Krishna, Krishna also saw Putana. So then Shukadev Goswami describes that Balaka Marika Graham Vibhudaya Tam Balaka Marika Graham. So when Krishna saw her, he understood her to be a Balaka Marika, one who kills children, and Graham, one who is, who accepts this as her vocation. So Krishna immediately recognized that this lady is not as pure as she appears to be. She's not a demigoddess. She's not Lakshmi Devi as my poor Brajabasi devotees innocently think, but she's actually a witch who's expert in killing small babies. And that supreme entity, that Krishna, as if afraid of her, Nimilita Ikshanaha, he closed his eyes. And then Putana, she took up this child and placed him on her lap. Not realizing, as Shukadev Goswami says, Yathoragam Suptam Abuddhi Rajjutihi, the logic of the rope and the snake. Sometimes a person unwittingly picks up a snake thinking it to be a rope. He mistakes the rope to be a snake. And naturally, we know the consequences of that, especially if the snake is a poisonous one. So similarly, Putana picked up this child, baby Krishna, little knowing that this child would be the cause of her death. She was thinking that she would be the cause of the death of this child, but actually it was the reverse that happened. Srila Prabhupada mentions here, very interestingly, that there are two kinds of perplexities that are mentioned in this verse. The first kind of perplexity was Krishna's perplexity, and the second kind of perplexity was Putana's perplexity. So Krishna's perplexity was that he saw this beautiful lady coming in who was acting in a very motherly fashion, but still Krishna knew that she had come to kill him. That her playing a role as an affectionate mother was simply make-believe, was simply an act that she was putting on. So Krishna was momentarily perplexed. And he thought, this is like a mother, she's coming like a mother to me, and at the same time she wants to kill me. So there was a little bit of perplexity in baby Krishna's mind. And as far as Putana was concerned, she was perplexed because she was not understanding, she did not understand that Putana, that Krishna was actually going to be the cause of her death. And she was actually taking a rope, a snake to be a rope. And in this fashion, both of them were perplexed. Now, in this pastime, as soon as Putana comes into the room where Krishna is lying, and Krishna sees Putana, and then immediately closes his eyes. Now this pastime of Krishna closing his eyes is a matter that has fascinated the devotees, and the acharyas have commented extensively on this. And Jiva Goswami has commented, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has commented, Srila Prabhupada in Krishna book has also extensively commented about this one act of Krishna closing his eyes soon after seeing Putana. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives 5 reasons for Krishna closing his eyes immediately upon seeing Putana. The first reason, he says, is that Krishna wanted to show Putana and to the others that he was still a child. And he wanted to tell Putana, I am afraid of you. So just like a little child may be afraid when faced with the prospect of harm, or any human being actually, and especially a child, so Krishna closed his eyes to indicate that he was fearful. He wanted to encourage Putana to come. If Krishna showed fearlessness, perhaps Putana may have hesitated, but he wanted to show his childish behavior. He wanted to act just like an ordinary child. It is precisely because of actions like this that Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan become even sweeter, because he imitates the ways of ordinary humans, even though he is the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent Supreme Personality of Godhead. The second reason that Krishna closed his eyes was to avoid seeing such an inauspicious personality as Putana, whose only business was to go around and kill children. And also, the third reason that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says is that he was going to kill Putana, so he did not want to make this violence auspicious by the touch of his glance, of rather Putana coming towards him. So he didn't want to lend some kind of credence or some kind of auspiciousness to the violence that Putana was going to inflict or attempting to inflict on Krishna. And also, he was apprehensive that he now had to kill a lady who was posing as his mother. So he wanted to avoid seeing someone who had come as a mother but was going to kill him. And finally, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Krishna closed his eyes because he did not want to see the inauspiciousness of Putana's death. Srila Jiva Goswami gives very similar explanations, and Srila Prabhupada in the Krishna book also has some explanations, and I'll mention those which have not been covered by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Srila Prabhupada says in the Krishna book that Krishna closed his eyes in order to reassure Putana in case she developed some doubt about picking up Krishna and placing him on her lap. So just in case there was some apprehension or some hesitation and Putana started getting a little fearful, oh, I better not pick up this child. If she hadn't done that, this pastime could not have happened. So Krishna closed his eyes to reassure Putana, so that Putana would continue to be motivated to come up and pick Krishna. Another reason that Srila Prabhupada gives for Krishna's closing his eyes is that in Vedic culture, there are various categories that need to be protected. Children, cows, etc. And amongst them, women are also a category who should not be harmed, let alone be killed. So now Krishna knew that he had to kill this demoness who was a woman. And since such an act was against Vedic culture, it was not very pleasing. But nevertheless, it had to be done. It was something very unpleasant. So because killing a woman in Vedic culture was something that was looked down upon very greatly and prohibited, Krishna closed his eyes. And another reason that Srila Prabhupada gives is that Krishna closed his eyes because he took Putana to be his nurse. In this way, the closing of Krishna's eyes when he saw Putana has been explained in various ways by our acharyas. So then Shukadev Goswami describes that Putana enters Krishna's room, and Mother Yashoda, Mother Rohini are there, so are other gopis, and none of them stop her from going right up to Krishna and picking her up. They just sat there because in their innocence and being captivated by her beauty, by Putana's beauty, they just let Putana do whatever she wanted. So Shukadev Goswami describes Tam Tikshna Chittam, that her chitta was Tikshna, very fierce. And although she was trying to treat the child better than a mother, she was trying to show that she had such a loving motherly attitude. Actually, it was vicious. It was very deceitful. It was like kosha, parichitta ashvat. It was like a sharp sword in a soft sheath. So there was a lot of deceit here. And as she went in, she looked like an affectionate mother, but she wasn't. So, Srila Prabhupada also emphasizes this point in the purport, that Mother Yashoda and Mother Rohini were not under the spell of Mahamaya. Generally, the beauty of this world, the beautiful forms of this world, they captivate everybody, and that is the influence of Mahamaya. But the influence under which Yashoda and Rohini were was Yogamaya, not Mahamaya. And at that spot, at that very spot, this lady, Putana, having lifted up baby Krishna and placed him on her lap, began to suckle him. And she placed the nipple of her breast, which was smeared with a very dangerous poison, which had the power to be effective immediately. It wasn't like a slow-acting poison that many murderers use so that there wouldn't be any trace left of their involvement in the crime. But this was a poison that was immediately effective. So she had smeared that on her breast. And then she placed Krishna's mouth there so that Krishna would suckle at it, and then in her estimation, Krishna, this baby, should die. So Krishna took the challenge. So Krishna took hold of her breast and squeezed it very hard and sucked out both the poison and her very life. And it seemed that Krishna was angry. So why was Krishna angry at Putana? Generally, when a baby will suckle on his mother's breast, there will be a mood of love and dependence and shelter. But Krishna's mood appeared to be one of anger. It appeared probably that he was angrily suckling at his mother's breast. So what could be the reason? Srila Prabhupada explains that Krishna was not angry for his own sake. He was angry because Putana had been killing so many babies all over Vrajamandala. So because of her heinous crimes, Putana or Krishna was very, very angry. And as he suckled on the breast of Putana, he actually sucked out her very life air. Now there are interesting comments given by Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in this regard. Srila Jiva Goswami says that Krishna actually did not suck out the life air from Putana's breast. It was his anger that did that. Now keep in mind that because Krishna is absolute, that everything about Krishna is also absolute and spiritual, so Krishna's qualities can also be personified. So therefore Jiva Goswami says it was Krishna's anger that actually sucked out the life air. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says something similar. He says that it was the Lord's destructive potency, which is called a Samhara Shakti. Samhara means destruction. So the Samhara Shakti, the destructive potency of the Lord, it was that Shakti that actually sucked out the life air via the breast of Putana. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur then gives the example of a man cutting a tree with an axe. So even though we generally say that it is the man who cut down the tree, which is a fact of course, but actually what contacted the tree was the axe. The man is only holding the wooden handle of the axe. It is the metallic iron part of the axe, the blade, that actually contacts the tree and cuts it. Of course, it is the man behind who is responsible for it, yes, but the man does not personally cut the tree. It is the axe. So similarly, Krishna personally did not suck the life airs out of the breast of Putana. Rather, it was his destructive potency, the Samhara Shakti. Something very interesting. So in the next verse, Shukadeva Goswami explains that Putana felt excruciating pain. Such pain that she had never before felt in her life. In every center of her vitality, every center of her being, the pain was extremely unbearable. And she began to cry out. Prabhashini, she began to cry loudly. Muncha, muncha, alam. Muncha means to give up. Alam means to say it's sufficient. Stop it. So basically, what Putana was crying out was to Krishna, stop it, give up, give up, give up my breast, stop suckling me now. Because she was in so much pain. And perspiring, her eyes wide open and her arms and legs flailing, she very loudly cried again and again. And Shukadeva Goswami mentions the dramatic things that happened as a result of Putana's crying in this fashion. Quite extraordinary, and it gives us a glimpse into how powerful Putana must have been. That when she was screaming loudly and flailing her hands and legs, what kind of impact there was on everything else around. The whole universe, it appears, was trembling. The earth with its mountains and the outer space with its planets were all trembling. The lower planets in all directions vibrated, and people fell down fearing that thunderbolts were going to strike them. And then Shukadeva Goswami mentions that Putana lost her life. The life airs had been sucked out of her breast, out of her body through her breast, and she fell down with her mouth wide open, spreading her arms, legs and hair. And interestingly, she fell down in the pasturing ground. Because when she started feeling that pain as Krishna was suckling her, she ran out into the pasture lands. Somehow or the other trying to get rid of Krishna. But Krishna clung on. And when Krishna clings on to somebody, there is no way that person can get released from those clutches. So, it is also interesting that, as Shukadeva Goswami mentions, Putana regained her original form. What happens in the case of mystic yogis who can change their form is that they can do so only under certain conditions. When they are under extreme pain, and especially under life-threatening situations where there is a possibility of departing from their bodies very soon, then they are unable to hold on to their new assumed forms, and they once again go back to their original forms. So this is the reason why Putana could not hold on to her assumed form of a young beautiful lady. Shukadeva Goswami gives the example of Vritrasura having fallen when he was hit by the thunderbolt of Indra. And then Shukadeva Goswami says that when the gigantic body of Putana fell to the ground, it smashed trees within a limit of 12 miles. Appearing in a gigantic body, she was certainly extraordinary. Now, again, Jiva Goswami mentions here that it is astonishing that when Putana's gigantic body, which was miles long, it fell to the ground, it crushed so many trees, but it did not harm the humans or the animals there, like the cows. And elsewhere, Jiva Goswami also comments that actually when Putana fled from Krishna's Nanda Maharaj's house and she went into the pasture lands, she was running, she was moving very fast because she was in desperation to somehow get rid of Krishna. She must have traveled quite a distance, because Jiva Goswami says that actually the place where she fell was the personal garden of Kamsa, and the trees that were destroyed were laden with many delicious fruits. So in this way, Putana ran out there and she fell to the ground with a big thud. And then Shukadeva Goswami describes Putana's large body, quite a picturesque and a grotesque form. Her teeth were like a plough, her nostrils were like mountain caves, her breasts were like slabs of stone that have fallen from a mountain, her scattered hair had the color of copper, her eye sockets resembled deep dark wells, her thighs looked like the banks of a river, her arms, legs and feet looked like bridges, and her abdomen seemed like a dried up lake. And we can well imagine that the Brajavasis were horrified. They were frightened like anything, and they were shell-shocked. They had never seen anything like this in their life. And as they stood there completely struck with wonder, and they didn't know what to think of this. First of all, the terrible shrieks and the screams of Putana, made the blood curdle. And then to see her gigantic form, which was so horrible, and then to see her falling down in the pasture like that, this was something quite beyond the experience of the Brajavasis. So eventually when the gopis and the gopas got up and they reached the place where Putana was lying down on the ground, Krishna was fearlessly, casually, happily playing on her mountain-like breasts. And they came forward with great jubilation to pick him up. Now Srila Prabhupada gives a very instructive purport here about Bhagavat Tattva or Krishna Tattva, about the principle of Godhead. What does it mean to be God? You see, when we are small children, we are deficient in intelligence, sensory capacity and physical power. Even in every respect, we are deficient. However, when we grow up to youth and middle age, we acquire strength, we acquire intelligence and wisdom and so on. So there is a vast difference between our capacity intellectually, physically, mentally, when we are babies, when we are children, when we are youth, and when we are old, when we are elderly. So, but for Krishna, it is not like that. Whatever form Krishna may appear in, whether it is the form of a baby, or the form of a child, or a teenager, or an adult, or if he appears in any other form like a fish, or a bird, or anything, Krishna remains always the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-merciful, Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no diminution in the power and the intelligence of the Lord because he was appearing in front of Putana and the Brajavasis as a small baby. Generally, small babies are very delicate and very weak. But Krishna appeared like that externally, but actually he was as powerful as he is in any other situation. So this is what it means to be God. That God is powerful in all circumstances. It's not that he becomes powerful only when he has a certain weapon or when he has got some training in martial arts or something like that. He is always powerful, unlimitedly powerful. So now that the gopis had in their minds, rescued Krishna from Putana, they were now obsessed with the idea of giving him protection. The elderly gopis of Vrindavan all loved Krishna just like Mother Yashoda and Mother Rohini did. Naturally, not to the same level because Mother Yashoda's love is quite unparalleled. Nevertheless, they all had very strong maternal sentiments towards Krishna and towards Balaram as well. So now in a few verses, Shukadev Goswami is describing how they ventured to make arrangements for Krishna's protection. The first thing they did is they offered Krishna protection by waving the switch of a cow. You know, the back of the tail, the ending part of the tail, and you swish it like that. And that is considered to give protection. So Srila Prabhupada says here, he speaks about the importance of cow protection, incidentally. As we all know, the people of Vrindavan were agrarian people. They were essentially cow protectors, cow tenders. So the cows were the center of their life. So Srila Prabhupada says that the ladies could take charge of protecting a child simply by taking help from the cow. They knew all these techniques. There are so many facilities afforded by cow protection, Srila Prabhupada says, that are forgotten these days. But the Brajavasis were well aware of these things. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by speaking about how even today people living in Vrindavan depend on Mother Cow to fulfill so many necessities and also to give them protection. They take cow dung, dry it, and even today for those of us who have been to the rural areas of Vrindavan or Braj, we will see the Brajavasi ladies making cow dung patties and putting them out to dry in the sun, and then they have these beautiful mud-made, cow dung lined containers for these cow dung patties, which they use as fuel. They also keep sufficient stock of grains, and their milk and milk products exist profusely because of the cows. They solve economic problems. So simply by giving protection to the cows, the villagers live so peacefully. And the final sentence, Prabhupada says, even the urine and stool of cows have medicinal value. Shukadev Goswami then says that further protection was given to Krishna with the help of the cows. His body was bathed in cow urine, and then his body was smeared with the dust that has been raised by the hooves of moving cows. This is called Go Dhuli. Dhuli means dust. When the cows move, especially at the time when they return from the forest into the village and they come in a large number, so with their hooves they raise a lot of dust. Now this dust is considered in Vedic literature and culture to be very auspicious. And that time of the day is also considered auspicious. It's called Go Dhuli Bela. Bela means the time. And that was precisely the time at which Uddhava came to Vrindavan when he was sent by Krishna to assuage the feelings of separation that the Vrajavasis were feeling from him, from Krishna. So, and the third thing, they applied a tilak with cow dung to various places of the body. And with each application of the tilak, they were chanting the names of Lord Vishnu exactly as we do when we apply Gopi Chandan on our body. Then the gopis chanted mantras and performed the task of purification by doing achaman. They chanted the Nyasa mantras, and then they chanted many other mantras which were composed of the various names of Lord Vishnu for protection of Krishna. And these mantras were specifically intended to drive away any evil influences that might trouble children. And it is a custom in the Vedic culture that children are especially vulnerable and they are afforded protection by things like this. Children are especially vulnerable to negative energies, to evil influences. So mothers would generally do this. They would chant various mantras for protection, and ultimately it is a chanting of the holy names of the Lord that can vanquish all such disturbances. So whenever there are any negative energies present, whenever there is fear of any ghostly beings being present or anything of the sort, the best thing that one can do is to chant the holy names of the Lord. Now, since you're all in London, a little pastime of Srila Prabhupada comes to mind, that when Prabhupada was at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, one lady came to him and told him that her house was haunted by a ghost and she was very afraid to stay there. So Srila Prabhupada called the devotees and told them to go to that lady's house and walk all around the house, within the house and outside the house several times, and all the while chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra loudly, which the devotees happily did. And then that lady's problem was solved. So whenever there are any such issues, then we should remember to chant the holy names of the Lord. As has been mentioned previously also, it is actually the Supreme Lord, Vishnu or Krishna, who actually protects us. The protective potency is Krishna's. That protective potency may be reflected through or transmitted through various agents. It may be some other individual or a human being like a doctor or a policeman or a father or a mother, or it may be through a medicine even. Srila Prabhupada mentions here, Aushadhi Chintayet Vishnum. In the Ayurvedic Shastra it is mentioned that ultimately the healing power of the herb is Krishna or Lord Vishnu. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aushadhoham, that I am the healing herb. So the healing potency of any medicine is a representative of Krishna. So we may take all sorts of medicines and all sorts of medical care, but if Krishna's mercy is not there, then we will not get healed. So Vaidyo Narayana Harihi also, that the ultimate doctor is Lord Narayana or Lord Hari. So therefore, by chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra fervently, regularly, we will ensure our protection in all respects. And then Shukadev Goswami continues. He says that finally, after chanting all these protective mantras, Mother Yashoda then began to look after Krishna by allowing him to suckle her breast. And once Krishna was satisfied with that, then she lay him down on his bed to sleep. Now, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that when a baby drinks milk, its mother's milk, it's an indication that the baby is in good health. So now the gopis wanted to test whether Krishna was in good health or not, because they were apprehensive and fearful after what had happened about Krishna's well-being. And now that Krishna was happily suckled at his mother's breast and then went to sleep after that, reassured the gopis that all was well with Krishna, and they became pacified. Now meanwhile, Nanda Maharaj and some of the gopas, the cowherd men, who were returning from Mathura and coming to Vrindavan, they chanced upon this gigantic body of Putana that was there. And Nanda Maharaj and the others were struck with wonder. And Prabhupada mentions that there were three reasons for the wonder that Nanda Maharaj experienced when he saw this body of Putana. The first thing is that he had never seen such a gigantic body of anybody in Vrindavan. Second, he wondered where such a gigantic body had come from. How was it not seen? Did it just simply fall from the sky? He was completely perplexed. And the third thing that was a cause of wonder for him is he began to think, am I really in Vrindavan, or am I come to some other place mistakenly? Probably under the influence of some kind of illusion or something like that. Did I wander to some other place and not come back to Vrindavan? So he was quite confused like this. Because indeed his confusion was understandable. The sight of Putana's dead body lying there would be enough to strike a sense of wonder in anybody. And then Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men exclaimed that, yes, now we know that Vasudev, Anakadundubhi, must be a great saint or a master of mystic power. Otherwise, how did he understand? How did he foresee the occurrence of such a calamity? And Srila Prabhupada explains that there is a difference between Kshatriyas who are very much in the world and aware of what's going on in the world, and simple Vaishyas like the Brajavasis. Brajavasis were very simple-hearted and liberal, and they were not much aware of what was happening in the outside world. So they were struck with wonder. Whereas Vasudeva was very much a Kshatriya, very much in active politics, so to speak, and diplomacy. He was a keen observer of the political scene at that time in Mathura. He understood what Kamsa was up to, and after keen observation, he could understand that all sorts of troublesome things were going to happen. That is why he had cautioned Nanda Maharaj. So in his innocence and simplicity, Nanda Maharaj assumed that this reflected, or this meant, that Vasudeva had some great mystic power. Of course, as Srila Prabhupada mentions here, Vasudeva is the father of Krishna. It's not an ordinary thing to be the father of Krishna. Only the purest of pure devotees can be that. And pure devotees like that have actually all the mystic powers. But those mystic powers are covered over by Yogamaya because a devotee likes to relish the transcendental mellows of devotional service. In any case, now the Brajabasis cut up Putana's body into little parts because it was so inauspicious to have this huge body lying here like this of a demoness. And also it was a big eyesore. So, and to burn it also they needed to cut up the body. So they cut up the body into small pieces and they took the pieces far away, covered it with wood and started burning it. And the idea behind burning is, as Prabhupada explains, that when people kill a snake, they also burn it because there's a possibility the snake might come back to life or something. So they burn the snake. So the Brajabasis didn't want to take any chances, so they cut the pieces of the body and they burnt the body. But lo and behold, what happened? There was a big fragrance that was coming from Putana's body. Aguru Saurabha. Saurabha means a fragrance. Aguru is one of the most fragrant substances that we can find. So, as Putana's body was burning, this fragrant smell was spreading all over Vrajamandal. And everybody around was able to smell it. Shukadev Goswami mentions that because Krishna had sucked Putana's breast and Krishna had killed her, he had actually purified her. Because whenever Krishna comes into contact with anything or anyone, that object or person becomes purified. Prabhupada elsewhere gives the example of the all-powerful sun. The sun can purify even a dirty substance and a dirty place, but is not affected adversely itself. The sun rays still remain pure. So similarly, Krishna is the all-powerful transcendental sun. Whenever he touches even the most contaminated persons or places or substances, those places, etc., get purified, but Krishna remains always the ever pure, transcendental, supreme personality of Godhead. So Putana had become completely spiritualized, her body that is, and all her material contamination had ended, her sinful reactions had been terminated. Srila Prabhupada begins the purport with one dramatic line. Such are the effects of Krishna consciousness. Indeed. And we should remember this with a couple of exclamation marks after the sentence. Such are the effects of Krishna consciousness. What effects is Srila Prabhupada talking about? The fact that an evil demoness like Putana, who came there only for the purpose of killing Krishna, now her body was completely purified and it was fragrant like aguru. This is the wonder of Krishna consciousness. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes the importance of hearing and chanting about Krishna. When we do that, then our senses get purified. And with the purified senses, when we continue to serve Krishna, then automatically one moves in the direction of love of Godhead. This is called bhakti. So Putana somehow or the other was connected to the Lord. She was induced to directly or indirectly render some service to the Lord by feeding him with her breast. And because of that service rendered, although it was not her intention to render service to Krishna, her intention was to kill Krishna, but because of that inadvertent, indirect service offered to Krishna, this is the result that she got. And not only that, not only was her body completely purified, but what was her spiritual destination? Stanam Dattvapa Sadgatim. Shukadev Goswami says that because she offered her breast milk, or he offered her breast to Krishna to suckle as a baby, so she got Sadgatim, she got the spiritual destination. And then Shukadev says, Kim punah shraddhaya bhaktya Krishnaya paramatmane yachan priyatamam kimno raptastan mataro yatha. This is the logic of Kaimutya. Kaimutya kim uta. If by doing it like this, you get this much benefit, if by doing it like that, how much more benefit can you get? So the idea being that if an evil demoness indirectly, inadvertently offered a little service to Krishna and got Sadgatim, the spiritual destination after she died, what then to speak of those? Shraddhaya with faith, bhaktya with devotion, and yachan priyatamam kimno, and those who offer things to Krishna that are very dear to him. For those who have this affinity, like the mothers of Krishna, who gave their the breast milk to Krishna, the other older gopis who may at some time, and in future they would, in the Brahma Vimohana Leela. So what to speak of their fortune? Now Srila Jiva Goswami offers some very interesting insights into this. He says that Priyatamam here indicates degrees. There is something called Taratamya Nyaya, the logic of good, better and best, positive, comparative and superlative. So the idea being that if Putana, who was a demoness, got this result, how much more will happen if one offers service with faith to Krishna? Step 1 after Putana. So if you take Putana as step 1, okay, let's take this as step 2. Step 2, how much more will a person get if that person offers something to Krishna with faith? Even more than that, step 3, what if we offer something to Krishna with devotion, with love? Then step 4, what more will happen if one offers with affection something that is dear to Krishna? In the previous case, we may offer something that may or may not be dear to Krishna, but here you're going to offer something with affection to Krishna, something that is dear to him. How much more will happen, next step, if you offer with great affection something that is dearer to Krishna? And how much even more will happen if you offer to Krishna with the highest affection that which is dear most to Krishna? And what then to speak of those whose very life is Krishna and whose only happiness is Krishna's happiness? So there is a gradation like that. If for this you get this much benefit, then for that you get how much more benefit. So a comparative analysis, and that's what Srila Prabhupada says here in the purport also. So here we can make a comparative study. If Putana could attain such an exalted position in spiritual life by neglectfully, enviously making an offering to Krishna, what is to be said of Mother Yashoda and the other gopis who served Krishna with such affection and love, offering everything for Krishna's satisfaction? And that is why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has declared that the gopis, not just the young gopis but also the older gopis, are considered the paragon of pure devotion. Shukadev Goswami then goes on to say that actually Putana got the destination in the spiritual world that was very, very exalted. What was the destination? The word used here is Swargam. But both Srila Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur are very emphatic on the point that the word Swargam here does not refer to the material heavenly planet, the Swarga Loka of this world where Indra and the demigods reside. Rather, here the word Swargam refers to the spiritual world, to the Vaikuntha world. And Avapa Janani Gatim. Janani Gatim refers to the planet of the mother. So it is the planet in which Mother Yashoda is. Now Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains the significance and the purport of this term Janani Gatim. Gatim means destination, Janani means mother. So he says that Putana attained the same planet as Yashoda. Yes, she did. She attained Goloka, but she attained a different part of Goloka. Not exactly that part of Goloka where Mother Yashoda resides. The part where Mother Yashoda resides, that realm of Gokula, is suffused, is surcharged with the spirit of service in prema, the highest prema or love. Now Putana did not serve Krishna with anything resembling love. So she could not go to that part of Goloka, but she went to another part of Goloka which is predominated by happiness and prema. There is some kind of, there is devotion there, but there is some kind of distinction. There is a kind of a less intimacy there. The intensity of prema is less there. Small degree of formality enters into the service there. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur goes on to say that actually the motherly gopis and also the cows who fed milk to Krishna certainly got a higher destination than Putana did. After all, how could Putana get the same destination as Mother Yashoda? That's not possible. So she got the destination resembling a nurse, like that of a nurse. Not exactly a nurse, as Srila Prabhupada also mentions, but like that of a nurse. And this has been confirmed by Jiva Goswami, who says that actually Putana did not directly become a mother, she became like a nurse. And because she imitated the mode of a mother, she got a position like that. But Krishna actually did not drink milk. He pretended to drink milk. He imitated the act of drinking milk. And then, of course, we have the famous verse of Uddhava, where in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where he glorifies Krishna in that momentous conversation between Vidura and Uddhava. Uddhava is remembering Krishna. And in the course of that remembrance, he says, Aho bakiyam stanakalakutam jigam sayapaya yadapya sadhi lebhe gatim dhatruchitam tatonyam kamva dayalum sharanam vrajema. He says, Aho, oh, where can one find someone more merciful than Bhakti? Bhakti as a sister of Baka, the demon Baka. So how can a Kamva Dayalam Sharanam Vrajema? Where can one find a personality more worthy of taking shelter of, who is more merciful than Krishna? Why is it that? Why is he so merciful? How can one conclude that? Because even though she applied poison to her breast and tried to feed Krishna that, she came there with the intention of killing Krishna, but Krishna accepted the motherly sentiment that she had come in the guise of a mother, even if deceitfully so, and lebhe gatim dhatri uchitam tata. And he gave her the destination of a dhatri. of a nurse. In this way, the Acharya Uddhava explains the exalted destination that Putana attained. And na punha kalpate rajan sansaro jnana sambhavaha. And one should never think that these gopis were ordinary people and that they returned to this material world after they left their bodies. So such was the exalted position of all these gopis who were feeling intense maternal love for Krishna. So just because they were engaged in simple activities, one should not underestimate their glory. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions here, even though the gopis who were friends of Rohini and Mother Yashoda and who allowed their breasts to be sucked by Krishna were not directly Krishna's mothers, they all had the same chance as Rohini and Yashoda to go back to Godhead and act as Krishna's mothers-in-law, servants, and so on. Their central affection was for Krishna in some transcendental relationship, and therefore they were guaranteed to be promoted to Goloka Vrindavan in the next life, to live with Krishna eternally in spiritual happiness. Shukadev Goswami then says that the fragrance of Putana's burning body spread far and wide, and Brajabasis living in distant places of Brajabhumi smelt it and came there wondering what the source of that fragrance was. And when they heard about what had happened, they were also very, very astonished. Suvismitaha. And Nanda Maharaj, of course, in his simplicity and innocence, simply considered that this is the mercy of Vasudeva. Then he went up to Krishna. He took Krishna in his lap, as if Krishna had returned from death. He smelt his head and enjoyed transcendental bliss. Srila Prabhupada mentions here that Nanda Maharaj did not understand how the Brajabasis had allowed Putana to enter into his house, nor could he imagine the gravity of the situation. He did not understand that Krishna had wanted to kill Putana and that his pastimes were performed by Yogamaya. Nanda Maharaj simply thought that someone had entered his house and created havoc. This was Nanda Maharaj's simplicity. And in the last verse of this chapter, Shukadev Goswami gives the Phalashruti, the transcendental benefit that can be attained by hearing this pastime. This pastime is called Putana Moksham, the liberation of Putana, by Shukadev Goswami here. And he says, Govinde labhate ratim, shrunayat shraddhaya martyo Govinde labhate ratim. If one hears with faith these pastimes, Krishnasya Arbhaka means a child or his childhood pastimes. If one hears with faith and devotion these childhood pastimes, and especially the killing of Putana, then one will obtain attachment or rati to Govinda. And these pastimes, because they are so adbhutam, they are so wonderful, they will captivate our hearts and draw our minds and our entire consciousness at Krishna's wonderful activities. So in this way, Shukadev Goswami concludes the 6th chapter, in which he has described the pastime of Krishna killing Putana. So I am exactly on time, I think. Maybe just 1 or 2 minutes left. I'm sorry I could not leave time for questions because the discussion took up quite a while. But we do have 1 or 2 minutes. So if there is any question, then I'll be happy to answer. Maybe just 1 or 2 perhaps.
Sure, Maharaj. You just muted out. I couldn't hear you at the end.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe...
Fine, there is one question.
Yes.
today is the appearance of Vamanadev in the UK, and it would be nice to hear about Putana's previous life, as she was attracted to Vamana in a motherly way. Krishna fulfilled the desires, so she came again as Putana. I was wondering if you could possibly just elaborate on that a little.
Yes, I wanted to speak about it, but somehow there wasn't enough time. So when Vamanadev appeared in the court of Bali Maharaj, he was seen by Bali Maharaj's sister, some sources say daughter, whose name was Ratnamala. This little child, this little boy, looked so charming that Ratnamala's maternal instincts were aroused. And she thought in her mind, how nice it would be if I could feed this little child my milk. But when Vamanadev exhibited his gigantic universal form and he took everything away from her father, and in fact he even imprisoned or captured her father, then her initial feeling of motherliness and affection transformed into anger and hatred. And she said, how I wish I could kill this child. So Krishna fulfilled both her desires, not in that life. So she was reborn as Putana. So she got the chance to try to feed Krishna, and she also got the chance to try to kill Krishna. And in the process, Krishna killed her and liberated her.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, so I
Do you
think
have
we'll
time for
stop.
maybe one more question?
Okay.
Sorry, Maharaj, we couldn't hear you again at the end.
Sorry?
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No, we can't. We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, Maharaj, we can.
Okay.
Can you just repeat the last few sentences you were saying?
Yeah, I said we have time for one more question, right?
Sure, okay. Fine, okay. So thank you so much, Maharaj, for initiating the retreat with this wonderful pastime of the deliverance of Putana. It was very insightful, sweet, and we hope we can take some of the teachings with us. So thank you so much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. And have a wonderful time hearing all the other speakers today and tomorrow. And all of you are getting transported to Vrindavan for 2 days. Thank you very much. Shri Shri Radha Landanishwar ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.